If, like most people, you believe student protests began during the turbulent 1960s, that's understandable. The issues during that time were especially contentious and had far-reaching implications, such as the draft and the Vietnam War. But that's not when students began to revolt against injustice. Let's hop into a time machine and visit the year 1507 in the bustling city of Padua, Italy, where a remarkable event was taking place. At the heart of this event were the disgruntled students of Padua University. They were upset, not over grades or exams, but because their coveted holiday had been canceled. This might seem trivial to some, but to these students, it was a matter of principle. The vacation in question was the Carnival, and for those students, the equivalent of spring break. Can you imagine what would happen today if spring break were suddenly canceled? The students felt their voices needed to be heard, their concerns acknowledged. This marked the first recorded instance of students standing up against what they perceived as an injustice. It was a pivotal moment, one that would set a precedent for countless student protests in the centuries that followed. So, the first seeds of student activism were sown, and they would only grow in the centuries to come. Fast forward to 1766, where we find ourselves in the midst of a revolt known as the Bread and Butter Rebellion, or simply the Butter Rebellion. This culinary revolt took place at none other than Harvard University in 1766 and was the first recorded student protest in what is now the United States. In the decade preceding the American Revolution, economic difficulties made the acquisition of fresh food difficult. Students were unhappy with other aspects of the institution, and one day, their anger spilled over. The spark for this protest was a simple yet universal displeasure: the quality of food. Yes, bread and butter, the staples of any meal, were at the heart of this dissent, with one student said to have loudly voiced his displeasure, citing the rancid butter and demanding butter that stinketh not. The students, fed up with subpar sustenance, agreed with their classmate and decided enough was enough. They stood up, voiced their frustrations, and launched one of the earliest significant student protests in America. The Bread and Butter Rebellion was more than just a food fight. It was a proclamation of dissatisfaction with living conditions. It signified a refusal to accept less than what was deserved. This rebellion marked a significant step in the evolution of student protests, setting the stage for the issues that would be challenged in the future. As we move into the 19th and 20th centuries, students began protesting against being treated like children by their educational institutions. A wave of resistance swept across campuses worldwide as students demanded respect and autonomy. They were not just recipients of education, they were active contributors to their learning journey. In the United States, the free speech movement of the 1960s, born out of University of California, Berkeley, became a symbol of this struggle. Students rallied against the university's restrictions on political activities, advocating for academic freedom and participatory democracy. Across the Atlantic, the May 1968 protests in France saw students unite with workers to challenge the status quo, demanding more democratic and egalitarian institutions. These instances of resistance were not isolated events. They were part of a larger movement against paternalistic treatment, a movement that ultimately led to the recognition of student rights and freedoms. These protests played a crucial role in shaping the modern students' rights and freedoms, paving the way for the activism we see today. Now let's examine the legacy of these early protests and how they've shaped the student activism we see today. The echoes of the past reverberate through the corridors of time, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the realm of student activism. The spirit of protest, born in the classrooms of Padua University in the early 16th century, has grown and evolved, becoming a global phenomenon that has changed the landscape of education and society. In the wake of the Bread and Butter Rebellion, students worldwide began recognizing the power of their collective voice. They realized that they could challenge not only the quality of their food, but also the quality of their education, their rights, and their place in society. This was a pivotal moment in the history of student activism, setting a precedent for the role of students in societal change. As we moved into the 20th century, this spirit of protest continued to thrive. In the 60s and 70s, universities became hotbeds of political activism. Students, no longer content with being treated like children, stood up against the injustices of their time, from civil rights to the Vietnam War. This activism played a crucial role in shaping the social and political landscape of the era. Fast forward to the 21st century. and the legacy of these early protests is still very much alive. Today, students across the globe continue to use protests as a tool to voice their concerns and fight for their rights. They march for climate change, for gun control, for equality, and for a better future. They rally against tuition hikes, against discrimination, against unjust policies. They stand up, they speak out, and they make a difference. Through these protests, students are not just shaping their educational institutions, they are shaping the world. They are continuing the legacy of their predecessors, carrying the torch of activism into the future. From the holiday-seeking students of Padua University in 1507 to the modern student activists, the spirit of protest lives on, continuing to shape the world of education as we know it.